Coming up on This Week in Enterprise Tech, Assange has an enterprise problem, we're going out of band, and getting to know about advanced firewalls. TWiT on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for the following show is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, recorded August 20, 2012, Episode 6, Behind the Firewall. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by GoToMeeting with HD Faces by Citrix. It just takes a webcam and a click to turn your online meeting into a high-definition video conference. Sign up for your 30-day free trial today. Visit GoToMeeting.com, click on the Try It Free button, and use the promo code ENTERPRISE. And by Audible.com. With more books than you can shake an artificially demented sword-wielding motorcycle at, Audible has the books you need. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/enterprise. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is put together. I'm your host, Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, and we're here joined by two fantastic guests. We've got, first of all, Mr. Dmitriy Ayrapetov from Dell SonicWall. Dmitry, thank you very much for coming on.
It's a pleasure.
You're with Dell SonicWall right now because, well, Dell acquired SonicWall, yes?
That's right. Exactly 3 months ago, Dell acquired SonicWall.
Well, happy birthday, kind of anniversary. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, right?
It's a very good thing, yeah.
Right, because Dell's a leader in the enterprise and SonicWall is a leader in security and,
Exactly.
and appliances, and now you get to sort of join forces, as it were.
It's as if you ran the M&A team.
All right. And on the other side of me, I have, as always, Mr. Brian Chee. He is the director of the Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu, Hawaii. Brian, you mentioned that you were melting.
Yeah, it's pretty hot in Honolulu right now. My drive-in at 7:30 was about 82, 84 degrees.
Oh, ow. Now, I've always wanted to ask you this. How do you keep your network gear from not eating itself? I mean, enterprise gear especially is known for generating massive amounts of heat. And, well, you know, Hawaii is pretty hot as it is.
Actually, it's not so much the heat that's the problem, it's the humidity. I've actually had to modify my in-row air conditioners to a high-capacity condensate pump. It just doesn't keep up, and the tray fills up and it shut down the air conditioner. So I've actually had to go and buy a high capacity pump for them.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I actually helped with a deployment in Kauai, and they were very proud of their data center. It was super refrigerated. I mean, it was one of these things where you actually had to put in a parka. I didn't tell them that was silly, but the problem was every time they opened up the door, all this moist air would rush in and it would condense on the equipment, and then they were wondering why they were having equipment failures. You don't get that,
yeah.
do you?
Oh, yeah. Not too bad. I try not to keep the data center Arctic just to deal with the humidity that rushes in when you open the door.
Well, that's always a good practice. Now, we want to jump straight into the Enterprise Byte. And that is a little story that you may have heard about. I'm not sure if you know this man, Julian, is it Assange? Assange? Yeah, I know. No one's ever heard of him. But evidently he's making some waves again. Now, I don't want to get into the WikiLeaks story because it's been done every way from Tuesday. But there actually is an enterprise angle here that a lot of people forget about. And that is, well, how do you secure data when you're dealing with these huge enterprise-class networks? Brian, you and I have both worked with Interop, and this is a constant worry for us because, as every network administrator knows, there is a fine balance between making your network usable and making it secure. Well, if you make it too usable, you get something like what you have with WikiLeaks, where you could have really sensitive information sucked down and taken off the network. If you make it too secure, then you have an unusable network. Now, Dmitry, you work with this question all the time. Generally, what would you say are the what are the guidelines for finding that balance?
You know, that's a trade-off that pretty much every IT administrator that we talk to runs into. If security becomes overbearing, it gets turned off. So we as a security vendor have to always find that nice balance, and we have to identify what makes it overbearing. Is it ease of use? Is it simplicity? Is it performance? Different organizations have different risk stances, and I think it's really up to each organization to determine what level of risk are they willing to tolerate, and at that point make sure that they properly size the equipment and do their research. I mean, it's advice that you can give pretty much in any industry, but it's doing your research. It's as simple as that.
Actually, Snowman Sam in the chat room has a very good guideline number 1. Don't lose your freaking mind. And I think that's a really good piece of advice. He's making a joke, but that's totally valid. And that is, whenever we have a data breach, whenever we hear about a data breach, the very first knee-jerk reaction is to slam the door shut. Yep. Okay, everything is locked down. No one has access. You're going to have to put in your credentials, 3 credentials to get a single piece of data. Yep. But, of course, that's not what we want to see.
No, and you know what? That type of heavy-handed approach actually often encourages users on the network to find alternate means of doing what they wanted to do initially outside the channel that you may control.
Right. Chee, you reminded me of a story once when I was in Hawaii of a user who had a series of passwords because he had to get into a sensitive folder or drive. And the way that he dealt with it was he kept them all in a huge Post-it on his screen.
Oh, yeah. And you got to deal with it in a slightly different way. When you start talking about real, Department of Defense, lives on the line type of security, 90% of security is policy. If you haven't thought this through in the first place, no matter what technology you throw at it, it's not going to work. You have to know what you want to do first. You can't make it. The firewalls and security devices don't read minds.
Right, exactly, yeah. And unfortunately, that seems to be a tendency in our field, which is we like to use technology as a fix-all. It's a crutch. And that is, if we have a breach in security, we like to throw equipment at it. We like to say, okay, this firewall will fix it, without saying, we may need to actually train people. We may need to change a few policy measures here. We might need to change how we do business so that the users can get what they need, but at the same time, we can keep them away from stuff that they don't. Dmitry, one last question to you. I mean, again, when you're finding this balance, what kind of resources do people have for changing policy and for training employees?
On the changing policy, what's really happened in the last few years especially is that the tools that allow administrators to create policies have really grown in the breadth of types of policies that they provide. Let me get specific. Instead of, for example, blocking things like Facebook right now, you can actually allow people to use Facebook but block maybe Farmville, right? And that's something that an IT administrator does. And now the IT administrators have that at their disposal. And it's just the entire networking industry is undergoing that type of a change. Educating users is still an unsolved problem.
So. Absolutely. And actually, Brian, to throw it back to you, I want to take something out of the chat room. Bruce S., he says, I'm happiest when my client says, why do we pay you? Nothing ever happens to our system. And again, that's one of those things that we deal with all the time. When we're doing our job for security, they should think that it's a waste of money, right?
Oh, yeah. We're totally the unsung heroes, especially in the Department of Defense. It's like, why are we paying you? That means you're doing a good job.
We haven't had a security breach in 30 years. I mean, come on. Why do we still have you around? That's the mentality. Now, I do want to take a break to talk about one of our sponsors, one of the people who keeps the light on, one of the companies that helps us bring you all the enterprise goodness. That's Audible.com. This episode of TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, was brought to you by Audible. Audible is a leading provider of audiobooks with over 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals. Audible is it's your complete bookstore for your life on the go. Now, for my listeners, right now, Audible is offering a free audiobook just for trying out their service. I downloaded Daniel Suarez's Demon because I've heard about it for the longest time. Actually, Daniel Suarez was a guest on Triangulation here at the TWiT network not too long ago, and I am absolutely engrossed in the story. It's all about artificial intelligence. It's about automated cars and vehicles, sword-wielding motorcycles, people, and just one really, really demented uber geek. Now, what I want you to do right now is I want you to go to Audible at audiblepodcast.com/enterprise. Go there, sign up, get your free audiobook, and just try it. Download it to your iPhone, to your Android, to your iPad, to your laptop, and see if Audible might be the thing for your busy lifestyle on the go. Again, I thank Audible for being part of the TWiT network. I thank them for supporting This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, speaking of This Week in Enterprise Tech, we let our chat room, we let our fans vote today on what our pre-recorded segment would be. I gave you the choice of either fiber or out-of-band management, and, well, we have a winner for Stuff My IT Guy Says.
Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, host of TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech on the TWiT network. In this segment of Stuff My IT Guy Says, we're taking a look at out-of-band management. Now, out-of-band management was a topic on several TWiT episodes because it is an important part of, well, networking for IT pros. Let me explain why. When we think of a contemporary network, there's really two networks that are part of it. The first is the production network, and then we've got the management network. Now, the production network is easy to spot because it's everywhere. It's the switches and the servers and the access points, the parts of the network that users connect to. If you are a home user or a small business user, it's the thing that connects you to your ISP. The production network is, for all intents and purposes, the only network you're concerned with. If you are a home user or a small business user, the production network and the management network are probably combined. In fact, if you type in 192.168.0.1 or 1.1, you'll probably get to the configuration screen for your gateway or your router. And from there, you can change your IP settings, play around with DHCP, maybe poke a few holes in your firewall or your NAT so that the outside world can access computers inside your LAN. But in an enterprise-class network, that's not such a great idea. And the reason is simple. You don't want your users to be able to reconfigure your access points or your switches or your servers. You want them to be able to use the services without being able to access the management. That's where out-of-band management comes into play. Here at the Interop Hot Stage, where we're setting up for Interop 2012 at the Javits Center in New York, we've got dozens of these boxes and access points, and we need to be able to manage them at all times from the NOC, from the Network Operations Center. Here we have a very simple setup. We've got an access point and we've got a switch. Now, you'll notice that on enterprise-class hardware, they always have a console port, either a DB9 serial port or an RJ45. That port can be connected to a serial console server like we have here from OpenGear, which allows us a single interface to access the command line of those devices from one place, normally from the NOC. We also have an IPKVM, which allows us to actually see what's going on as if we were sitting in front of that machine, and a PDU, a power distribution unit, which allows us to turn individual devices on and off. Combined, you can see why this is an important setup for enterprise pros. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have an access point that is no longer serving out Wi-Fi to my conference attendees. Well, I could actually walk over to the access point, but it might be on the other side of the building. Instead, what I'll do is I'll console in. I'll connect to my OpenGear box here, which is connected to my Azirus array, and I'll be able to get the command line interface. From there, I'll be able to show all the details about the array. I'll see its configuration. I'll see if there's any errors. I'll see if there's a funky configuration state that the array has fallen into, and I can make the changes there to make the array work. Now, if that doesn't work, that's why we've got this, the PDU, which is, I love this piece of gear. This allows me to actually flip it off and on again, actually dump the power and make the device reboot. It's the old IT saying, turn it off and turn it back on again. The same thing goes for my switches. I can console in, get the actual command line interface, look to see if there are any errors, see if there's any configuration problems, and we'll just make sure that the switch is working the way it should be. Now, a few things to note about this is that this management network is not available to the users. So in other words, if you're connected to my network, to my interop network over the access point, the wireless access point system, you cannot access any of this gear. For good reason. We don't want you turning things off. We don't want you messing with configurations. We don't want you logging into servers. The other thing to remember about this is that it scales over vast distances. Because you might be saying to yourself, I've got a small shop. I've got 3 or 4 switches. I've got 2 or 3 servers and maybe 1 access point. Well, if that's the case, yeah, it's easy enough to walk into your data closet, plug in your laptop, and reconfigure it. But what happens if your network spans several floors, or several buildings, several cities, several states, several countries, several continents? That's where out-of-band management really shines. Most network enterprise professionals I speak with understand why it's good to have an out-of-band management network, but I always get the same, well, I don't have the resources, or I can't afford it, or my superiors won't let me buy it. Now, I understand that, and I always respond, well, yes, I get it. Money is tight, resources are tight, and you may not be able to buy the gear that you want to buy. But then I always ask them, how much does it cost to have downtime? How much does it cost to have someone actually go to your colo and turn your gear on or off? How much does it cost for you to jump onto a plane, fly to another country, drive to your colo, drive to your office, and fix things that could be fixed remotely from a remote seat if you had an out-of-band management network? And when you start thinking about that, getting this is just a drop in the bucket. Now, if you are an enterprise professional, or if you just want to know how the world is connected, you need to know more about out-of-band management networks. And if you want to know more about out-of-band management networks, you need to go to a networking conference. Go to any conference near you. Go to Interop. Come find me in the NOC, and you'll be able to ask real enterprise professionals how they use out-of-band management networking to make their jobs that much easier. I'm Father Robert. This is Stuff My IT Guy Says. And until next time, you've been learned.
Now, you asked for it, so we brought it to you. That is our introduction to out-of-band management. Now, Brian, again, you've dealt with a lot of out-of-band, and at Interop, we call it Access Ether. This box right here is literally one of the boxes that will provide out-of-band management capabilities at our show in New York. It's a serial console box from OpenGear, and we've been using more and more of these over the year to make sure that our gear, well, is accessible at all times. Do you want to describe what the out-of-band management network is for you in really quick terms?
Well, my out-of-band management is just a physically separated network that allows me to get into console ports and things like that. But more importantly, the out-of-band management network that I run actually is 3 miles underwater. That service call is a real bummer, if you ask me.
Right, exactly. And so what we have is we have a network underneath the network. In our case, because we're Interop and because we like to do things kind of, well, funky, our ring is 10 gig and our out-of-band management network is 10 gig. And then we use VLANs in order to tag over the out-of-band management network into the NOC, meaning that anyone plugged into the NOC network can actually access everything on the production network and everything on the management network. But again, you know, the simplest out-of-band management network is to have physically separated boxes that allow you to plug in and always access, you know, the console server of your devices. Dmitry, I know that your boxes all have console management ports. Mm-hmm. What sort of services can they access over the command line interface?
Well, they can do a lot of configuration, troubleshooting configuration through the console. And by the way, absolutely critical to have out-of-band management. It's so yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of configuration, restore to previous settings, check the network connectivity, the usual troubleshooting.
Right. You know, one of the things that we've been telling our trainees at Interop is that if you don't have an out-of-band management network, you actually don't have a network. Yep. Because it's only on as long as there's absolutely no problems with the configuration. You need to have a way to get in when the production network goes down, and that's what actually makes an enterprise class network.
Yeah. Question for you. So what about 3G USB dongles, for example?
Yes. I was hoping you would bring that up because this box, this OpenGear, This is sort of the next generation of serial console servers. It used to be that the only thing that you could do is you could take one of these cables, you could plug it into your server, into your box, your AP, your switch, and then you would connect them into these. They look like Ethernet ports, but they're not. They're just serial. They're RJ45 serial. This also has a series of ports in the back that allow you to hook up a 3G or a 4G USB modem. This actually has a physical modem. If you have an old POTS line, you can actually dial into the box. So you can have multiple vectors to get back in. This was specifically designed for a remote location. So you would have it out in a colo in the middle of a cornfield. Then you could use a POTS line. If the POTS line was dead, you would use the 3G modem.
Exactly,
And you want that kind of redundancy, especially with something like Chee has, where it's 5 miles down and you just don't have the option of physically going to the box to kick it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Chee, now, you're going to help me out, I believe, because I actually want to do a tutorial on how you go from start to finish from a serial console box like this Open Gear to actually having an out-of-band management network. You feel like a discussion with me at some point?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Actually, the one point I wanted to make about out-of-band management is a lot of us remember when Slammer hit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when Slammer hit the interrupt net, the in-band network was so clogged that all the in-band consoles locked up, but the serial consoles didn't. So we were able to go through Access Ether. We actually had devices characterizing Slammer. So within, I think it was within 10 minutes, we had ACLs applied through the console.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking for. I mean, you want that backdoor into your network so that you're never locked out. That's just good management. Yeah. Now, one of the other things that I do want to mention about this is, well, right now, if Jason goes over to my laptop, you'll see there's a group of engineers in Brisbane, California. This is our super secret location. This is Interop. This is where we're assembling one of the world's largest temporary networks. We've got dozens of vendors. We've got a couple of $1 million worth of equipment sitting in this warehouse, and we're just putting it all together. We use technology like out-of-band management console servers and IPKVMs and power distribution units in order to be able to manage it once we deploy it all over a conference center the size of multiple football fields. And right now, actually, I want to give it a shout out. They're not advertising with us, but I feel so strongly about the education that comes from going to a network conference, from actually talking to an engineer. I want to mention that right now, Interop actually has a couple of volunteer slots open. This has never happened. These slots always fill up, but for any number of reasons, I think we have like 3 or 4 slots to volunteer at the show in New York. It's actually pretty cool. If you show up, we'll let you play with all the gear. You'll sit side by side, shoulder to shoulder with the engineers who actually wrote the protocols that run the internet. You'll be a part of the NOC team. Heck, we'll even put you up in a hotel in downtown Manhattan. It's a very, very cool way, and it's a rare opportunity to actually sit down and learn about what we talk about on this show in the real world. So if you get a chance, drop by their site and, well, show them some love. And if you're in New York, why don't you volunteer? You can sit with me. We'll shoot the breeze. Now, let's get to the meat. Well, actually, before the meat, I do want to mention another one of our wonderful sponsors. Now, people on the go over the summer have run into a problem, and that problem is that they need to keep working even though they're technically on vacation. I know it's not a great thing to do, but, you know, you have to stay connected. In a world like we have today, if you're not connected, you're just not much of anything. And that's why Citrix made GoToMeeting with HD Faces. There's something special about being able to sit down with somebody and actually see their facial gestures, to see what they're doing with their hands, to see if they're happy, if they're sad, if they're actually understanding what you're saying. And most of the time, that gets lost if you do a phone conference. Not so with GoToMeeting with HD Faces. When you sit down, you get a crystal clear picture. You get to see what the other person looks like. You get to see if they're fidgeting. You get to see if they're uncomfortable with what you're saying, or if they love it, if they're on board, if they're ready to go. Now, one of the great things about GoToMeeting is that it's incredibly easy to set up. It's literally a few mouse clicks. You've sent an invitation, they open it up, they download a very small client, they run it, you're in a meeting, and you're ready to go. You can share your desktop, you can share your video feed, and basically do everything that you would do if you were actually physically sitting across from them in a table, in a conference room, 3,000 miles away. Now, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to try GoToMeeting. Download it on your iPad, download it on your iPhone, get it on your laptop. Just try it so you know what's possible, so you know what the capabilities of the software are. Right now, my listeners can try it free for 30 days. For the special offer, visit GoToMeeting.com, click on the Try It Free button, and use the promo code ENTERPRISE. Be sure to use the promo code ENTERPRISE, and we thank Citrix for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, Dmitry, we're talking UTM. Oh, no, wait, no, I'm sorry. We're talking next-generation firewalls. Explain to me, what's the difference? We have UTM, which was Unified Threat Management, but that's falling out of favor with the industry. Why?
Well, so yeah, you're absolutely right. It started off with UTM, and what UTM was a collection of security services that were placed on a single firewall, on a single appliance. It was the first step in consolidating security services. Next generation firewalls refer to really firewalls with a single engine, single security engine. So you don't have the packets bouncing around in multiple subsystems inside the firewall, going from stateful firewall to the IPS subsection. It's a single consolidated engine, and one of the there are a few very, very important distinct factors that separate UTM from next generation firewall. Application awareness, so the ability to identify traffic at a semantic level. It doesn't matter what port the traffic came in on. What matters is that what is the traffic. If I have streaming video on a non-common HTTP port, who cares? It's a non-common HTTP port. It's still streaming video. That and the ability also to, again, just have the single unified engine that does IPS at minimum as a security engine. So IPS, application awareness, SSL decryption, those are the characteristics of a next-generation firewall.
I see. Okay, so the trend behind UTM was to take multiple boxes, physical boxes. So you'd have your load balancer and your VPN and your firewall, et cetera, and you brought them all together in one box.
That's right.
The next generation firewall is actually bringing it together so the same piece of silicon can actually look at the packets, do deep packet inspection, and give you all the different services within that same interface.
It's actually within the software engine running on that silicon, yes, but it's a much tighter integration of the security engines rather than, as you pointed out, rather than having the separate systems, having a single consolidated engine. Again, this application awareness, this looking beyond ports and protocols. Just ports and protocols are still important for access policies. They're almost irrelevant in today's, I hate the term Web 2.0 because it's been beaten to death at this point, but the fact that I can do anything through the web browser at this point renders old firewalls useless, pretty much in that sense.
Right. Now, let's list it off for the person at home who it's kind of going over their head right now. What services are included inside of the next generation firewall?
Sure. You start with stateful packet inspection. You don't get rid of that. That's the foundation. Intrusion prevention at a minimum. If you're not running intrusion prevention, and I'm not just talking about protecting servers, but protecting clients, our laptops, majority of attacks into the networks actually happen through clients, through us browsing. So you need to run intrusion prevention for the clients. Application awareness, the ability to identify applications and the ability to identify users. Without those three, you don't have a next generation firewall. After that, threat prevention such as antivirus, the ability to do SSL decryption, those are things that differentiate different next generation firewalls. But without the first three, stateful, IPS, application awareness, you do not have a next generation firewall.
Okay, so I understand that, and those are the things that you're really looking for when you're shopping for a next generation firewall. But what are the metrics that a buyer would actually compare products against? I mean, it gets confusing because there are a lot of vendors out there, and some of them make some very, very good products. Chee has actually done a pretty good breakdown of the different vendors. But how can I tell that one product is going to be serving my needs if I don't really have an apples to apples comparison?
Great question, and it's not a simple answer actually. I mean, networking is a complex topic. Security is an even more complex topic. Just going down the list off the top of my head, you want to first of all understand what type of traffic you have on your network. Do you have large packets? Do you have small packets? What is the average packet size? How many hosts do you have on your computer? If you're a 1,000 person company, but you only have 20 people online, you're a completely different environment from a startup that might have 50 people. Every single one of them their job is entirely online. So you need to look at how many clients you have. traffic patterns. Do you have bursts in large number of connections per second, or do you have just a steady trickle of traffic? So connections per second, overall throughput, traffic size, traffic composition. Though if you understand all those, you'll be able to size a next generation firewall properly. And the most important thing that I can, if your listeners and viewers can get away with one thing, is that when you look at firewall data sheets, and I'm speaking just industry in general, there are multiple performance metrics that are listed on the data sheet. The very first one always is firewall. And everybody just looks at that, and I've seen so many customers get burned with just looking at one metric, picking the wrong product, and then having to deal, everybody's frustrated at that point. Firewall, the most base metric, just refers to stateful packet inspection. Go down that list. What is the intrusion prevention performance? What is the VPN performance? And by the way, when you're looking at firewall performance and at VPN performance, don't forget that very often that's measured by RFC 2544, which specifies that you use UDP packets, and most of the metrics are quoted with 1500 byte packets. So when you're looking at a data sheet and it says that a firewall can do 3 gigabits, read the footnotes. That's probably 3 gigabits of UDP traffic, 1500 bytes. That is not a typical network, and you're going to get burned. Look for IMIX, look for different packet size metrics on the data sheet.
Right. Chee, you deal with this all the time, not just at the university level, but also because you do shootouts in your lab. In fact, I remember the last time I saw you, you did a major firewall shootout. What kind of metrics do you look at when you're actually comparing the amount of traffic passed through each box?
Actually, I kind of cheat. I actually go and grab traffic statistics from various size corporations that are friendly to me, and we kind of, sanitize them a bit. But I actually create network simulations based on real traffic and then do what-if scenarios on them. So I'm not just running RFC 2544. I'm running real synthetic web traffic. I'm running synthetic web traffic and telnet traffic and Skype and things like that over VPNs. One of the things that I did was I actually asked each of the firewall vendors, if you were to design a shootout, how would you design it? I take those, combine them together, and create an expected. That's the 0 format. And then if you have extra features, you get points. If you don't meet expected, you get penalized. It's a fairly well-respected firewall test, and we're hoping someday for it to become a new standard.
I don't want you to name any names here because that's not what this is about. But what would you say is the test that you run that, even if it's a non-real world throughput performance type metric, that really makes firewalls sweat?
Actually, we did a simulation of a regional corporation, which will be unsaid, and I ran one major regional office, and dovetailed into that I had, I believe, 2,000 regional offices, so small storefronts and things like that. They might have registers, might have a management station. I actually ran the equivalent of about 20 people per site, all funneling back through an IPsec VPN. And I ran it both at triple DES and also AES 256 and ramped up the Diffie-Hellman levels so that it was a more real-world simulation. And then I ran the traffic patterns that I got from various corporations. That brought most of the firewalls to their knees.
Right. Yeah, you're just throwing too much at them at the same time. Now, actually, another question for you would be, when people are shopping for these appliances, when they're shopping for a next-generation firewall, often they don't do enough to collect information about their own network, about their own usage statistics. You alluded to this in your opening, which is, look, if you don't even know what kind of traffic your users are passing, how do you know what kind of firewall you need to get? What kind of tools, what kind of resources do people have to be able to actually sit down and A, figure out what they should be looking for, and B, to actually record it?
Yeah. There are two approaches to this. One is you can use a number. You can always set up a span port and just go right to the source of the data. You set up a span port, copy all the traffic, run an Wireshark on it, start aggregating, looking at the statistics. That's one approach. The other one is every single firewall vendor will gladly give you an appliance to run. Again, set up that span port, set it up in one-arm tap mode, start having have the firewalls start looking at the traffic, see what its CPU utilization is. If you want, you can even toss it into layer 2 bridge or wire mode, so it's just a bump in the wire on the network. And again, I'm not talking from SonicWall. This is every vendor will give you a firewall. There's no better way to test than that. And if you see that a particular model is running at 80% of CPU utilization, you know that you didn't size correctly. And many of these firewalls will also give you, many of the next generation firewalls will actually tell you exactly what the traffic composition is. And from that, you can make a much better decision about what model you need, but also maybe whether you need to control some of that traffic.
Chee, back to you. Do you think the average IT user, the average IT admin, knows what kind of traffic he's looking at when he runs a span port, when he runs a tap, when he runs Wireshark and actually starts looking at the traffic flowing through his network?
I've seen an awful lot of people with really surprised looks on their face when they actually do take a look at a Wireshark feed. It's one of those things that you really ought to take a good hard look at. One of the things that I really love about next generation firewalls is being able to watch application flows. You know, how much traffic am I getting on the web? How much traffic am I getting on IRC, and so forth and so on. Surprises like that aren't a real good thing. Management tends to go and call you on the carpet when you're too surprised. I like making sure that I know about problems and I can, react to problems faster. And one of the things that I do, and I'll throw out here, is I love setting up zones. Zones allow me to have more levels of monitoring. It also has more levels of control. So I actually will never, ever, ever let someone in on a VPN that doesn't go through a zone, because lots and lots of infection vectors come through VPNs with people that are out in the field that aren't paying attention to patching and updates.
Right. And actually, I think you've hit upon, something that I see in IT all the time, and that is it's difficult to make policy. It's difficult to actually figure out what your users are doing. So instead, I'm just going to buy the biggest, baddest box I can buy and put it in and hope that it solves the problems, which, of course, it doesn't. Because as you mentioned, unless you have that separation and you know your different infection vectors, well, it doesn't matter what kind of firewall you have. It's just not going to work. Now, I do want to move on to the next part of the discussion, and that is specifically about VPNs, because that's something that the home user might actually be interested in. When we talk about VPNs, they're becoming more and more important because there are more and more people working away from the office. I mean, go back to the GoToMeeting advertising that we did. That's actually a popular service because you have people who need to be away from the office in order to get their work done. Well, if they're away from the office, they need to be able to get back in. They need to be able to get access to the data that they should have. What services, I mean, of course, you offer VPN, but what is it about the implementation of the Dell SonicWall firewalls and the advanced firewalls that you think are best practices?
Well, I can talk about let me make the discussion just a little bit more abstract. This is about best practices for VPN in general, and of course, Dell SonicWall participates in that, but it does apply to many other vendors as well. And I really want to bring in what Brian said as well. Zoning is so crucial. It is so crucial. If you buy a firewall, is just a tool. Just like any other tool, if you don't use it properly, just because you have it sitting on the shelf does not make it useful, right? You must compartmentalize your network, split your network, and that means at home as well. So for example, what we often advise for teleworkers, is split your network into a work network and a home network. So when your child, for example, comes with a laptop from school and it's infected with a virus, you can deal with that virus on the weekend, knowing that your work network, your work computer is not affected because there is it's a separate zone, there's different security. Coming back to intrusion prevention and security, you want to make sure that even if somebody on the remote end did get compromised, that the worms don't make their way over the VPN tunnel. You want to run either the intrusion prevention on their premises or on your incoming VPN zone. I mean, this zoning, compartmentalization of the network, deep packet inspection, even at the branch or at the home level, is crucially important. Security, the way I see it is, security is all about reducing risk. You never get down to zero unless you unplug your computer from the wall, right? So it's all about, just have layers of security, increase the number of places where a threat or an attack can be caught, and you reduce your chances of getting compromised.
Right. Yeah, and you know, one of the things about security is that I have seen absolutely gorgeous policies and hardware setups be defeated by the fact that there's that one executive who says, "Wait a minute, why can't I access X from home?" And so the IT person, of course, gives him access. Well, now you've just circumvented everything. And even though it's going through a VPN, yeah, you're right. Have you just allowed a vector of infection because you've poked a hole through all the security that you meticulously set up? Chee, you see this at the university level, right? Because, I mean, you've got researchers who need access to their data, and they don't understand why the unreasonable IT guy is saying, no, there are a few things you have to do before I let you do that.
Oh, I see it every day. And the realistic view of the world is you need to be able to go and let them have access to their data. Otherwise, you don't have a job. But it needs to be a balance. And one of the things is having a system where the IPS is integrated in, being able to integrate the zones and so forth, makes it a lot easier to make it as nearly invisible as possible. And then, unfortunately, after that, it's just balancing the policies. You know, can you give them access with and still reduce your risk?
Right. Okay. Well, let's ramp up the VPN discussion a little bit and talk about branches. This is a segment of VPN. I mean, of course, you want a VPN tunnel when you have a remote office so that all the traffic is encrypted. But what do you need to know about setting policy for allowing another branch to connect back to the home office? Now, it's one thing to restrict a user, to say, look, I'm not going to let you connect your VPN tunnel unless you're running an antivirus, and I'm not going to let you run it unless you're running these security policies. But what happens when it's an entire office of people that need to get access back to corporate?
Sure. One of the things that you want to look at there is what type of a deployment you want to have, whether you want to have a tunnel all mode or a split tunnel mode. And for those listening, tunnel all really means that all the traffic from that particular branch, even traffic destined for the internet, goes first to the headquarters and then goes out to the internet. Split tunnel mode means that traffic for the internet goes directly to the internet, traffic for the HQ goes directly to HQ. But it really comes down back to compartmentalization, the security zones, and running deep packet inspection security on all VPN traffic. For example, one of the most overlooked things from an HQ perspective in the branches is having a consistent security policy across all branches. So whatever vendor of firewall you use, make sure you look into their centralized management tools. So that way, when you roll out your 20th or your 100th branch, that you don't send out a set of instructions for a human to misinterpret, that you just send out a firewall that gets acquired automatically by your central management, and you push out a template of a security policy. And then you know that there is absolutely no risk that somebody decided to, got frustrated with setting up wireless and just put on WEP instead of WPA2. And speaking of wireless also, you absolutely must be sure that the wireless at the branch is secure. And by secure, I mean there's proper encryption, there's proper authentication to the Active Directory in headquarters. And again, they're coming back to intrusion detection, wireless intrusion detection, and intrusion detection for the content. Wireless is I would say, the number one cause of issues in the branches.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still of the school that there should be no wireless access points plugged into your secure network. That your final zone of security, wireless is just too insecure inherently to allow that. But again, I'm old-fashioned. Now, Chee, let me put you on the spot here. Tunnel all or split tunnel? What do you demand of your users? What do you demand of your remote campuses?
Oh, I can't get away with tunnel all. I've got to have split tunnels. I'm going to fess up right now that I use SonicWall SSL VPNs. And one of the things it allows me to do is I can actually put in additional routes that actually shoves into the route table on the remote machines. And that gives me a lot more control over where the traffic goes. So I can say, well, this route, X, Y, and Z routes will go through the tunnel, but anything else can go out to the internet. So it's kind of a compromise, but it works reasonably well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're running out of time, and there is one last topic of discussion that I absolutely want to get to, and it's because it's very important. This was actually asked of me over Twitter, and I got an email about it, and which is, you've got a whole subset of IT professionals out there who are not working with 10,000 seat networks. what are the differences? What are the considerations that need to be made when you're taking the knowledge that we're giving out right now and you're scaling it down for, say, a Soho, for a small to medium business, or even a small enterprise? You know, they don't have the resources of a huge corporation, but they still want to run the same policy. They still want to have the same sort of security. What can they do to take this and make it applicable to their network?
Sure. So many, let me preface this with saying that there are no enterprise or SMB risks or network attacks. They're kind of equal opportunity. The same virus will attack an enterprise just as well as it will an SMB. So there shouldn't be, in the mind of an IT admin, there shouldn't be a scale on thinking, oh, I'm a smaller business, therefore I don't need as much security. They should go for the best security they can possibly get, which is actually achievable with what's out there in the field right now. But on the other hand, you're absolutely right. Manageability. Some solutions require dedicated management console that might be a little bit too cumbersome, that might be expensive. Look for something with simplified use of management, with where you can get all the reports, all the information, maybe through the web UI. You may want to look for products that integrate more other solutions, so that instead of having 3 or 4 different consoles, your WAN acceleration, your wireless controller, etc., build it all in. Build it into we come back to the consolidation story at that point. But really, I want to say, don't compromise on security. There's a difference in scaling. Their SMB products are lower performance, obviously, but they should still look at future expansion. We've come across a number of our customers who purchase a product that they can afford today without looking at where they will be in 2-3 years. Remember, a lot of this equipment lives in network closets for 5-6 years. What's your company going to be like in 3 or 4 or 5 years? Do you want to replace it every single year or every other year? So those are other things to consider.
So basically, the same best practices that work for the enterprise will work for the small to medium business.
Pretty much, yes. Don't compromise on security.
Don't compromise. Find out what's going on your network. Open up that span port. Get the demo firewall. Look at the traffic. See what you need. Size it out. Source it. So that's encouraging. That tells the small to medium business admin that, look, I can play just like they play on the 10,000 seat network.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cheebert, I'm going to give the last word to you. What advice do you have for the SMB or SOHO guy who just wants to make his network a tiny bit more secure?
Don't compromise. In fact, I'm going to do one small sales pitch for SonicWall. A friend of mine, Dave Perry, over at SonicWall, spent a lot of time setting up a virtual lab. You can actually take a test drive of anything in the SonicWall product line, and you can find that off the main SonicWall webpage. Try it out. See if you like it. There's nothing like trying it out to tell you whether or not you're going to like the wizards, or you're going to like the zoning, or you're going to like this or that. Try it.
Try it. I like that. Okay, that's good last words. Now, we've run out of time, and this is a great discussion. This is fantastic. I mean, security is absolutely vital. But again, as you mentioned, it's not just security. When we're talking about advanced firewalls, it's security and all the services that you need to make your network accessible. It's a good thing that we've got professionals like you, engineers like Cheebert, who are willing to muddle through all the technical muckety-muck to make it easier for, well, the end user. Now, I do want to thank our panelists. First of all, I want to start with Brian. Thank you again for coming on. You are the brains of the show. I know I'm just the beauty. So let me give you a chance here. What are you doing in Hawaii? What projects would you like people to know about?
Well, right now I am actually tearing my lab apart. I'm in a 1950s era building, and there's actually asbestos in the lighting fixtures, and I'm tearing the lab apart so that the asbestos rebatement people can come in and redo the lights, and oh joy.
Oh joy is right. Now, Dmitry, what's going on at Dell SonicWall? I mean, I know that this acquisition is brand new, 3 months old. There's got to be some exciting projects that you can let us know about, hopefully not under NDA. What should we know about? Where can we go to find out about all the cool things that you're playing with?
Well, you can always go to our website. We publish a lot of news there. But right now, we're working on basically becoming the security provider for Dell. As you started the show off, we have a lot of technology. Dell has a tremendous brand recognition and reach. We're working on putting those together. But we're going to continue driving performance in deep packet inspection. That's going to be, and I think our customers or prospective customers will see some really, really exciting things, both in capabilities on the firmware that we're releasing in the next half a year, and some of the products that we're doing, that we've launched recently, and what's coming out in the next 2 or so years. We're going to continue pushing that performance envelope. Our belief is that deep packet inspection should be the minimum level of security in any network. Anybody who says they want a firewall, we want them to think deep packet inspection. I don't care if you go with SonicWall or whoever else. Security is about deep packet inspection at this point.
That is a true professional. I don't care if you use my product. I just want you to use my knowledge.
There's a much bigger area there. So.
I love it. I love it. And it looks like you've got the approval of the chat room. They actually like you. They like what you've said. They love the knowledge that you've dropped on them. So I'll make you this promise. We'll actually have some SonicWall gear on. We'll do it in a segment. We'll show people how to use it. We'll show them how to do some of the metric comparisons that you just talked about. I'm pretty sure they'd appreciate that.
Excellent.
And to the chat room, I want to thank you for wasting another hour with me in TWiT, in Uber Geek Land. It's wonderful to have you here. I want to thank you for putting us in the top 10 of iTunes podcasts. It's a fantastic honor. And, you know, it's wonderful to see you come back week after week after week to learn about how the world is put together. Now, if you could, I would love for you to drop by the TWiT webpage. Go to twit.tv/TWiT and subscribe. It could be iTunes, it could be Zune if you're still using a zombie Zune. It could be just a standard RSS feed. Find a way to get these episodes to you on a regular basis, because we do cover topics that build upon each other. If you watch from episode 1, you'll see how we've gone from talking about cloud computing, and we're going to be having an episode on the service level agreement. We've got an episode on out-of-band management. We're going to be building on console servers and on security appliances, so you need to watch all the episodes to find out what's going on. Also, I want to thank everyone here who's in the chat room. Our chat room is one of the best in the industry. In fact, I will say it is the best in the industry, filled with IT professionals and geeks and a couple of executives who just want to talk to one another and see a real-world example of how this interwebs thing works in the TWiT community. Also, follow me on Twitter. Twitter.com/PadreSJ. You'll be able to suggest topics for future shows, and you'll be able to tell me when I got things wrong. And I love hearing people tell me that I got things wrong. Also, if you could, please make sure, if you're watching this on a downloaded podcast, at least once, drop by live. Go to live.twit.tv at noon, Mondays, PDT, and you'll be able to join in all the fun live. If you join in the chat room, you'll be able to talk to me during the show, and you'll see I actually use the knowledge of the chat room to guide what we do here. As always, I want to thank the fantastic staff here at TWiT for putting on a show that is like no other. And remember, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just stay TWiT.